phone off. That's sad. Thank you all for being here today, and as I noted, please fill out public comment cards and bring them up to Tracy and Adam if you wish to speak on any particular item. And before we get started on our formal agenda, I would like to, I'm going to try to be kind, say thank you and goodbye to Jerry Powers, who is the Director of Parole. And I will say to everyone in the crowd who don't know Jerry well, he has many, many positives. He is articulate, he is bright, he's capable, he can move an agenda. But frankly, he has retired from more jobs than most of us have had. And you can take that any way you want. I mean, we could say that he can't hold a job very long, or we could say that everybody wants him, so he goes on to greater things. I don't know the answer to that today, except I do know he's going home after this job. We'll see where he pops up next. But I've had the pleasure of knowing Jerry for many, many years as he began as the Chief Probation Officer in Stanislaus County, and I was in Fresno County as the Chief Probation Officer. We forged a very quick friendship, and professionally, he has served as the President of the Chief Probation Officers of California on 2 occasions, and I believe he is the only one to hold the distinction of being Chief Probation Officer of the Year twice. Is that accurate? I don't, he'll tell you if I don't. I might as well brag on him a little bit before he starts. At any rate, he is been a huge force in corrections in California, both on the state level and the county level, and to say he is well-rounded is an understatement. So thank you for your service to this board. I went ahead and did it when your boss is gone because you don't need him anymore after today. And I really would ask you to say a few words about your long, meaningful career.
I'm not sure what to say. I've never heard Linda say nice things about me.
It hurt. I got a little choke in my neck.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I have retired once before, so I'm getting better at it as I practice. But my best guesstimate is that this will be my final retirement. But no, I'd just like to say thank you. I've really enjoyed working with the BSCC. You know, I started this, I was talking to Sheriff Gore, I started this back in 1984 in San Diego County as a student worker working in the juvenile hall down there. And so you think back 35 years or so, or almost 35 years, and I think the thing that strikes me the most is the people I've been able to work with. I've had the good fortune of working with, starting back, you know, just as a student worker, but certainly throughout my 35 years. I've had the privilege to work with some great sheriffs, Sheriff Collender, Sheriff Gore, Sheriff Duffy before Sheriff Collender in San Diego, and Stanislaus, Les Weidman, and Adam Christensen, and Los Angeles, Sheriff Baca and Sheriff McDonald. So sheriffs, police chiefs. I think the thing that makes me most proud is that I had a chance to have a small role in some of the most significant things that have happened in our criminal justice system. I look at Mr. Steinhardt, you know, we got to sit over in some of those legislative offices. I remember sitting with David and Sue Burrell and some of the legislative staff over there and crafting some of the juvenile justice realignment and working on AB 109 and all of those kinds of things. So, you know, to be able to say that I was there or that I got to see it happen and I helped to implement it in my county that I happen to be in is, to me, is really has been the highlight of my career. And so I certainly look back with that with a great amount of fondness. I'm going to miss the people. I'm going to miss the staff that I've had a chance to work with and to work for and to lead. They're wonderful people, and you know, the criminal justice system today is certainly nothing like it was back in 1984 when I started, and I think that's a good thing. I take pride in feeling like I had a little bit to do with some of that. So I want to thank you all. It's been an extreme pleasure. I'll miss doing things like this. So if you ever need somebody from the community to come and maybe help you out on some stuff, let me know, and I'm certainly willing to come back and help in any way that I can. And having said that, I've probably spent about 3 minutes longer talking than I should have, and I appreciate all of it, and I'm sure our paths will cross at some point down the road. So thank you.
Thank you. Your timing was perfect. Yay!
I just want to put in my 2 cents worth. Yes, Jerry, you were immensely helpful during those challenging years when we realigned the juvenile justice system. And, I don't get it. You're too young to retire. There must be a lot of paychecks coming in your mailbox. I'm just not, all those jobs. Anyway, one thing about Jerry is that we would sit around in these committees and try to design something new and go through these model structures. And occasionally we would sort of get off track. And the sharpest guy in the room, who maybe was quiet for a while, would say, "No, you're wrong, or what about this?" You always kept us from going on fool's errands, and it was always great to have you in committees to set us straight if our thinking got a little bent. And I will miss that. So best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else from the board? Okay. I noticed, Jerry, you spoke just long enough, so Secretary Diaz and Sheriff Groudon were able to make it. Sorry about the traffic. The BSCC tries to clear up traffic, but our powers aren't that great. I now ask Adam to do the roll call.
Chair Penner.
Present.
Mr. Diaz. Present. Mr. Powers. Present. Mr. Groudon. Mr. Gore. Present. Ms. Perez is absent today. Mr. Varela.
Present.
Mr. Ortola. Here. Mr. Barranco.
Here.
Mr. Mills is also absent, and Mr. Budnick is also absent. Mr. Steinhardt. Here. And Ms. Turner is absent as well. Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Turning next to announce that our counsel, Aaron McGuire, is here with us today. And now to the information items. I'm going to lean on Katie to begin hers. They always give me an opportunity to do a chair report. And my daughter got married last Saturday, and I think the only thing I could do is bore you with a lot of details about lace and food. Yeah, that was what yeah. So I'm going to table some of my comments on what got on prior to that after Katie.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members of the board, good morning. I'm Katie Howard, the Executive Director, and I want to give you some updates starting on the state budget. Conference Committee was in over the weekend and reached agreements on the state budget. Our expectation is that the legislature will come in and vote on that today. I heard they were coming in at 10. Did you hear the same? Okay, so we expect to vote on the budget today, and there are a number of new funding sources coming through to the BSCC. They're actually expansions of our ongoing grant responsibilities in a way that's really quite exciting. One additional positive change in the budget is that the STC augmentation of $6.15 million that the governor had proposed in May revised did wind up in the final budget agreement. So that is additional funding that restores some historic reductions that have been a result of changing funding sources. So it will help the locals. This is all to go out to the counties and local assistants to help with their training costs. And given that our board approved updates to the training standards in January, and in the core course, there are some incremental hourly increases in training that's required. That'll be very, very helpful. And I know that the counties were very pleased that STC funding came through. I want to give a few grant-related updates, and starting with the Youth Reinvestment Grant. This will tie to your agenda item today. I'm looking at the fabulous co-chairs, David Steinhardt and Chief Varela, who have put in countless hours over this last year on the Youth Reinvestment Grant. And I guess I would just say, there's more to come, which is really super. Kimberly, our field rep, who's the lead on the project, has an outstanding presentation ready for you, but I want to talk about what's in the budget connected to the U3 investment grant. As you will hear when it comes to the presentation on our awards that are going out this year, there was about $35 million in the main pot, if you will, for youth reinvestment projects. And the committee did a very good job and had established as part of the RFP a minimum scoring threshold. And even though there were, I think, a total of 44 applications that came in, not all of them met the scoring threshold. And the long and the short of it is that there's $5.9 million left on the table in that first round of funding. We are working collaboratively with the Department of Finance and legislative budget staff to draft a follow-on bill. This is not going to be in a trailer bill. It's going to be in a separate standalone bill, presumably authored by Assemblymember Reggie Jones-Sawyer, who has been the champion and the lead proponent of the Youth Reinvestment Grant. So what I expect, although this is, remains to be worked out in terms of the detail, is that the $5.9 million will be added to a new $5 million, so about $10.9 million, perhaps minus some admin funds, will be available for round 2 of the Youth Reinvestment Grant. We'll bring this back to you for action at our July meeting in terms of setting up a new executive steering committee or what have you. One other thing connected to that, looks like David may want to make a comment here, connected to the Youth Reinvestment Grant is that there was also a member's request that wound up in the budget deal for an additional $10 million to fund tribal diversion programs. So really very, very exciting news there. Co-chairs, thoughts to add right now?
I have some comments on the grant that I'm going to wait until the discussion item comes up. But that's an accurate portrayal of what's going on, and assuming it all goes forward and becomes final, it means that the ESC, which worked tirelessly, will have to go back to work. And ESC, whether it's the same or different
ESC,
people,
right.
we'll figure that one out, and more work to be done.
Great. So yes, as I'm mentioning all of these things, the usual practice of our board is to ask a board member to chair executive steering committees. So just jot notes on which ones you'd like to put your names in for going forward into next year. Because
Hold on just a minute. Sheriff Gore's writing rapidly.
Oh, do you need a pen? I have a pen. Anyhow, additional new resources coming in or additional resources, and also a huge shout out to the Adult Reentry Grant, which Chair Penner and Francine Tornor are the co-chairs of that executive steering committee. Those awards for round 1 are coming to you in July, but the really wonderful news is that, well, in 2 parts, we received a huge response on the Youth Reinvestment Grant. We put 2 components of the RFP out in January for warm handoff and rental assistance programs. The ESC has not met for its final scoring meeting, but I have the sense, heard it from a friend, that there are many, many, many high-quality proposals beyond the amount of funding that was available in those first 2 components. So with additional adult reentry grant money coming through, this year's budget is expected to include $16.5 million for warm handoff, $16.5 million for rental assistance and new money. So our hope is that we'll, it all has to come through in the budget and so on, but that we can come to you in July with a recommendation to work down the list and fund more qualified programs. CalVIP, the California Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant, also received significant funding in the budget. There had been $9 million proposed in January, and by the time it was all done, the total for this year, with a substantial portion being one time, but nonetheless, it's $30 million, with a $3 million set aside to fund rural programs. So CalVIP chair could be one of you. Let's see, in addition, Prop 64, the legalization of cannabis initiative, has in it a grant program for the BSCC. If you've read it, there are numerous kind of funding streams that come through, and there's been a lot of anticipation about when those deposits might first be made and at what level of funding. Our board, and again, we'll bring this to you in July, is going to be responsible for doing a competitive grant that focuses on public health and safety issues. So the grants, the eligible applicants will be local governments. And there will need to be an ESC. I think there's a pretty wide range of kinds of things that the grants could address, but it's to address public safety, public health, and fire impacts at the local levels related to Prop 64. And I should mention that those grants can only go to local jurisdictions that have not prohibited retail sale or cultivation of marijuana. So that was the thinking within the initiative of that the local governments should get some, basically mitigation type money, but only if they're allowing, the legal weed activities to be going on. So we're calling that our weed money for short. Let's see. So I want to mention the upcoming July meeting will be telephonic, and I know that Adam has been in touch with you. We'll have a meeting location here for those for whom it's convenient to come to Sacramento. Chair Penner and I will be in Anaheim at a meeting of the Chief Probation Officers, so some of our board members will be there. And please just be sure that Adam has your information on your location, and as you know, with telephonic meetings, if you are not in one of those two hubs, you'll need to provide a public location where the public can join you to participate in the meeting per the Bagley-Keene requirements. Those are my updates, except I really do want to take just a moment to thank and acknowledge all of the BSCC staff with all of these grants in particular, but all of the day-to-day work. I'm looking at you, Sean, our IT team, our admin team, everybody in this organization has really been working extra, extra hard, and I just want to thank and acknowledge each and every one of them.
Yeah, it's been a busy time. You get the summary of how the grants worked. You don't get to watch all the movement in this agency as they are prepped to get to you. And efficient, bright staff doing all of it. Speaking of efficient, bright staff, Aaron, do you have anything you want to say?
To you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just briefly, just following up on what Katie said, usually this is the time I give you sort of the burn jag legal updates in terms of that litigation. I also wanted to just quickly mention one of the requirements of applying for the burn jag is that we have to post on our website that what our application is going to look like for the 2019 awards. That has been done, and it has to go up for 30 days. And we also sent that for your review as well. Per prior board action, we've already authorized Ms. Howard to apply for those awards in prior board action. So we will do that within the next 30 days. In some of the discussions with the Attorney General's office in terms of what to do with the 2019 funds, I think we've discussed that once again, the federal government has included certain conditions related to immigration that conflict with California law in some way. And with the prior funds, the Attorney General sued and was able to obtain injunctions to prevent the enforcement of those new conditions. Those conditions, again, are in the 2019 funding. However, at this point, the Attorney General is looking at waiting for us to get the actual award conditions as opposed to filing a lawsuit prior to seeing those award conditions. And so we will have updates again, probably in July or a later board meeting in terms of what might the Attorney General will be doing with respect to the 2019 funds. But again, going back to the 2019 application, I think we would like to just pause for a minute and see if there's any public comment on the JAG application.
Seeing none.
And seeing none, we will go ahead and move on. And then we don't have any closed session items today. I did want to raise one legal case that I saw was published just the other day, which is People versus Raybon, which is and related to the Prop 64 discussion that apparently the people of the state of California, in adopting that initiative, also legalized the possession of marijuana in jails and the state prison. So that
Well, that is open-minded.
it's very, very open-minded. Turns out it is still against the law to smoke the marijuana in the state prison or a county jail, but simple possession apparently has been legalized. And I just thought I'd raise that for the board.
Yeah, that was a topic of quite a bit of discussion yesterday in email flurry. Some of them, me denying the new cultivation of marijuana programs that they wanted with this ruling. And I said, no, That's a joke.
Wow.
No, there's a lot of questions about that.
Wow.
Madam Chair, I neglected to mention and just wanted to let the board know that our State Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention met here yesterday. And in addition to working through some technical changes to the RFPs, which you'll hear about on the agenda a little bit later, we also had a really robust conversation with Chuck Supple, the director of DJJ, about the governor's proposal to move DJJ, rename it, and place it under the Health and Human Services Agency. So it was a very interesting conversation. We also talked a little bit about some of the more county-specific issues about declining populations in juvenile halls, and we had a really great conversation in which several chief probation officers came and participated. So it was a very productive day at the SACJ yesterday.
All right, moving on then.
And actually, and one more thing, Madam Chair,
One
because
more, okay.
we mostly just have a grant, I think we only have grant items on the agenda. I would ask the board members again to, as per usual, see if there's any potential conflicts as we are discussing these agenda items. Attachment B2 has a list of potential conditional awards, as well as I think it's page 4 and 5 of agenda item D. Right now, in terms of potential recusals, I would note, I believe Chair Penner on Prop 47, Mr. Urtola also on Prop 47, Nevada County Behavioral Health has applied. And then I would also look, even though Chief Varela participated fully in the YRG development and no funds will be going to his department, there are a couple of Ventura County applicants, and I think we'd probably look at a recusal on that one as well. So, and again, if there's any others, please let us know before we get to those items. But thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, all right. Moving now to the consent items on our agenda, and there's only one, and that's requesting approval of the meeting minutes from the April 11th, 2019 meeting. The board reviewed those. Any questions, comments? May I get a motion to approve that? Yes. Thank you. We got a first.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, motion carries on the consent items. Anyone in the public have any comments thus far? Okay. And once again, you filled out your speaker card if you want to approach during any particular item. I think we will move on to the action and discussion items, and turning to item B, the Youth Reinvestment Grant Funding Recommendations.
And then again, on this one, Madam Chair, I think we would look to Chief Varela, even though, again, I don't know if you wish to make any comments before exiting, but in terms of taking up the vote, I think we would, out of an abundance of caution, ask you to just excuse yourself from this item.
I do have a few comments, but I can wait till
Okay.
afterwards.
I think
if
that
that's okay?
works.
All right,
Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you. Okay. Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. I'm Kimberly Bouchard, the lead staff on the Youth Reinvestment Grant. And I don't know if I'm supposed to do this, but I'm going to take just a minute to say thank you and congratulations to Jerry Powers. As you were talking, I couldn't help but flash back to 2009 when David Steinhardt and Linda Penner and Jerry Powers were all working with me on an ESC for the Youthful Offender Block Grant. So definitely a lot of history here and a great contribution. Thank you, Jerry. I wish you well. All right, so for those of us who've been working on the Youth Reinvestment Grant, this is an exciting day, and I'm really happy to be here to share our good news with you. Almost a year ago, we began the process of implementing what was, at that time, brand new legislation establishing the Youth Reinvestment Grant. And I'm here today to present recommendations for funding proposals under that grant program. I have two agenda items to present. One for the Youth Reinvestment Grant component that makes funding available to cities and counties, and the other for the Tribal Youth Diversion Program, which falls under the Youth Reinvestment Grant, but makes funding available to California Indian tribes. So looking at this first slide here, we have just a reminder on the very highest level about these two agenda items and grant programs. In Agenda Item B, we'll be talking about the $35 million that's available for cities and counties to provide diversion programs. And then in Agenda Item C, we'll be talking about the $1.1 million that's available to Indian tribes for providing diversion programs specifically to Indian children. So, thank you. Okay, so looking at Agenda Item B, which is the component for city and county applicants. I wanted to take just a minute here to look at what it took for us to get to where we are today. So starting last July, I came before this board and asked for approval to establish an executive steering committee. And at that time, David Steinhardt and Mark Varela were appointed as the co-chairs. And I will echo Katie Howard in just saying thank you to both of them, even though Mark can't hear me, for their great leadership. It's been a long year, and there's been a tremendous amount of work, and they've done a great job. So with the appointment of the co-chairs, we moved into ESC development. The ESC went straight to work and met, put together the request for proposals, and on January 17th, I was able to bring that here and get your approval for the release of the request for proposals. With that in the field, we did receive 44 timely and qualified proposals by the March 29th due date. And then the ESC members transitioned into the proposal rating phase of their work, and on June 4th, they met and developed their final funding recommendation for this grant program. So then looking at just the purpose, the overall purpose of this funding is to divert youth from entering the juvenile justice system or from furthering their involvement in that system. And specifically, the idea was to do that by targeting youth who are under the age of 18 or under the continuing jurisdiction of the juvenile court, targeting youth who are in underserved communities, and especially in those areas with few or no existing diversion options, and also looking at targeting communities that have high rates of juvenile arrests and high rates of racial and ethnic disparities within those arrest rates. And then just to look at a few of the more technical components of this grant, there was a $1 million maximum for any one application, and there was also a $50,000 minimum for any application. Cities and counties are allowed to submit multiple applications as long as they were each unique. They were also allowed to submit regional applications. And I would make a quick note there, the regional applications, and you will see one of these in our list of recommended proposals for funding. Regional proposals could be above $1 million because it was up to $1 million for each of the involved jurisdictions within a regional application. All right, and then moving on, preference points were awarded under this grant for any applicant that chose to focus specifically on, serving Indian children. And for this grant, we have a total of 3 years and 8 months for the grant cycle, which with your approval today would begin on July 1st of this year. One of the things that the ESC chose to do was to break up this funding into 4 distinct categories. And so the categories that we have and that we worked with in developing the funding recommendation are small counties and the cities within those counties. And those within that small county competed for a total of 20% of the grant funds, or a little over $7 million. We also had the medium counties and cities within the medium counties that competed for another 20% of the grant funds. And then, of course, small counties and cities within those large counties, and the cities within those large counties competed for 20% of the grant funds. So with those small, medium, and large categories, we accounted for 60% of the funding. And then in order to recognize those proposals that had the highest ranking overall, the ESC chose to dedicate the remaining 40% of funds to the highest rated proposals regardless of location. So this was mentioned a little bit earlier, but just as a reminder, the ESC did adopt a 60% scoring threshold for this grant. So any application, in order to receive YRG funding, has to have obtained at least 60% of the total points available for this grant. So considering that scoring threshold and the categories that we just walked through, what we're looking at today is spending 29.1 million to fully fund 30 proposals. And of those 30 proposals, we're looking at 1 project in the small category, 7 projects in the medium category, 6 projects in the large category, and then 16 projects that come into that highest rated project overall category. And as was mentioned a little bit earlier, 29.1 million does not fully expend the available 35 million for this project. So we are looking at a remaining fund balance of roughly 5.9 million. And then we're going to move into some more detailed information here on what's being proposed for funding under this grant. So if these slides are a little hard to see, I would encourage you to take a look at attachment B2 in your agenda packet. And everything that's on these next few slides is also on that attachment. But what we have here for the small category, we received 1 application only, and so we're looking at fully funding that application. In the medium category, we received a total of 8 applications, but one of them did not achieve the required 60% for the scoring threshold. So we're recommending full funding of the 7 that did meet the scoring threshold. And then in the large category, we received a total of 35 proposals in the large category. And you can see here that we're recommending funding of 6 proposals within that large category. So just as a reminder, when we broke up the small, medium, and large categories, each of them were dedicated 20% of the funding, or roughly 7 million. So what you see on this slide is that by fully funding the 5 highest ranked large proposals and then partially funding the 6th highest ranked proposal, we fully expend that 7 million that's available for the large category. Now, the better news is when we move on to the next page, we see that we're able to spend the amount of money that's needed to take that 6th ranked large category proposal and make them whole. So they requested $1 million. We're partially funding that out of the large category, and then we're completing the funding of that out of our best remaining proposals category. In addition to that 1 applicant that has split funding, there are another 15 proposals that are included on this list that would receive funding under the best remaining category. And so this is just a summary of those slides that we just went through. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but if there aren't questions, we're looking today for approval of the ESC's recommendation to fund at 29.1 million the 30 proposals that we just looked at. And I should also say that I think Mr. Steinhardt has something he'd like to add also.
Sure, I'll jump in and thank you, Kim, and I'm going to get to some thanks in a minute. So this was a very interesting grant in my mind because it really carved out some new territory under the concept of diversion. And that's a concept that in the juvenile justice system we haven't really defined very well or put a lot of resources towards in the past. So thanks to the advocates, thanks to Mr. Jones Sawyer and others for going forward and creating this funding via legislation that had some very broad outlines as to what diversion is and how the state should invest in it. So it fell to the ESC to do the hard work of defining diversion in ways that hadn't been done before. And this was not an easy job because diversion is a concept that kind of moves around and isn't well anchored in California. So we came up with defining points of diversion where the project should focus. Do they focus pre-arrest? Do they focus at detention? Do they focus at the probation decision point? Do they focus at the DA point? What about probation violators? And we came up with pathways for applicants to pursue in each of those areas. Big challenges on the role of community-based agencies because most of this funding goes to CBOs, and the goal is to enhance the community-based capacity here in partnership with local government. So we defined that partnership as well. And then the geography, which is complex, cities and counties in the same grant pot and spread throughout California. So I think the ESC did a commendable job. And I think as a result, what we have here for approval is a portfolio of programs that are really going to tell us a lot about diversion, the models that work. There's a lot of evaluation that is to follow, and we will learn a lot from these grants. And our hope is that kids and communities will come out better as a result. So I think it's a really promising program overall. Just a comment on hard work. This was a lot of work. I've been on other ESCs, but this one was tougher, not just because of the scope of what we had to define and work on and the scope of the grants as a whole. But we got, each ESC member had to rate 25 proposals in less than 30 days. Now, we felt sorry for ourselves, but the reentry grant people had 35 proposals to rate. And we have more grants coming down the pipeline. So BSCC has quite a big, what can I say, bucket of work around these grants. And we have these squadrons of ESCs drawn from, they're all volunteers. They don't get paid for their time. They work long hours, and they adhere to a statutory stakeholder model of grant administration, which is unlike any other agency in government. When I look around, I don't see this stakeholder model built into a grant administration the way it is at BSCC. But, and one other thing is that the process has been redefined so that the rater reliability factors and the objectivity follow a whole new set of structures that are new in place. And I thank Casey for being our lead on that. So I don't want to go on, but I just wanted to sort of identify the work boundaries here before beginning to thank all of the people that worked so hard on this. Mark, I hope he comes back into the room and gets his opportunity to say what he has to say, but Mark and I teamed up well, I thought. And the ESC, I can't say enough about them. And of course, Kim and Casey and Helene and the other support staff worked really hard on what's being presented to you today. So that's all I have to say at this point, and look forward to a motion.
So yeah, I want to commend Dave and Mark on the great job they did, as well as Kim and the BSCC staff. I like some things that you did with RFP with allocating some funding to the best remaining proposals. I think that's that's different. I think that I really appreciate that. The one question I did have on the small jurisdictions, there was only one applicant and one award. I was just curious if there was any feedback from any other jurisdictions on hurdles that or things that might have kept them from applying.
Not that I heard.
Okay.
That was a surprise to me as well, Dean, because we had long conversations about making sure that small and rural counties had a shot at this funding and weren't, pushed off the map by, the big, quote, high needs counties. They just didn't apply. There are issues of grant writing capacity, Their issues of, do they have a community, this is community-based sector funding. Do they have community-based agencies ready to, go for this? So that was a sort of a disappointment in the whole picture, and maybe that should be taken into consideration in the next round.
I think one of the obstacles, at least that I've seen over the years, especially in the small, particularly the small counties, is many of them don't have the community-based organizations that could stand up a program. And if they do have a CBO, it's one or two providers. So maybe going forward, you might want to look at some way to address the lack of CBOs and allow for some of those county providers or in some instances town or city providers to act as if the CBO would, such as your mental health agencies and stuff like that.
Ma- Madam Chair, if I may, I just want to identify one additional feature of what's anticipated in round 2 of the Youth Reinvestment Grant. It doesn't specifically address the concern Sheriff Groudon raises necessarily, but one of the things that Assemblymember Joan Sawyer has identified as a required component of round 2 is that in addition to local public agencies being eligible to apply, there will also be the possibility for CBOs to apply directly in round 2. That may change some of the dynamics about who's interested and who's coming forward. I just didn't want to leave that out of our conversation today, even though it's not on what you're working on right now.
Okay, all right. I've now asked for comments from members of the public. Adam, do we have?
Yes, we have several. We're going to bring Dan Prince, Daniel Mendoza, Peter Elias, and Alex.
And we'll try to free-form your time here, but beware of me coming to ask you to speed it up around 2.5, 3 minutes.
I'll be brief, Madam
Okay.
Chair. Dan Prince, Chief Probation Officer from Imperial County. In anticipation of the vote, hopefully you'll honor the recommendations and will be the recipient of youth reinvestment funds. We're apparently the little county that could and might, so thank you. I want to thank staff on behalf of the Imperial County Board of Supervisors and the juvenile court in Imperial County in anticipation of the grant. If we are so fortunate, thanks to all of you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to staff for all their hard work.
Thank you.
I think I'm next. Good morning, everybody, Madam Chair, everybody on the board. My name is Daniel Mendoza. I work for Falls and Family of San Joaquin County. I just want to thank everybody for, your leadership and your efforts in trying to get this investment into, the most vulnerable children in the state of California. And with that being said, I just want to, emphasize and, I guess just put it, in everybody, put it in everybody's mind to always focus on the young people and making sure that the resources go to the most vulnerable and marginalized young people. And that I know the process is complex and stuff like that, but I do want to emphasize that, that a lot of people, I'm from San Joaquin County, and so a lot of our young people right now, are in need of these resources. And so it would be it's integral to to young people's future, for their success and so forth. And so just want to, emphasize again that, making sure that we get these resources in the right hands, in the right, place, so young people can, have the resources they need to succeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have Peter Leas from Fathers and Families?
Well, we will assume you made some fine comments for Peter.
Do we have Alex? Okay. So,
Daniel, you just want to stay up here and thank everybody?
okay, Crystal Rodriguez?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm from Stockton, San Joaquin County, from Fathers and Family, and I'm doing an internship here. And I wanted to speak more about the youth, and I was looking at how much money we're getting, and I was just like questioning, like, why is like the hurting counties getting like the least amount of money? Like, I see these youth and I can see the trauma in their faces. We have like groups that we form, like they come every like Wednesday. One of them is called Joven Noble, and I see a lot of them hurt and like they need healing and trauma. And I wanted to speak like they need our help, they need our guidance, and each minute in there is impacting their lives in the juvenile, and they also need jobs, and we're willing to hire them and guide them, but we also need support. We need money, and we need to invest in them and continue to guide them, because these youth are our future, and we need our future to be successful by investing in them. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we have Amani.
Hello, everyone. I just want to first off thank you guys for all the work you guys do, trying to help the better counties, communities, all that good stuff. I wanted to talk today. I'm also an intern at Fathers and Families, and growing up, I grew up in the Manteca area in the San Joaquin County, and my parents always consistently tell me, stay out of trouble. There's a lot of trouble in this area, and I've always noticed as San Joaquin County suffers from a lot of homelessness, a lot of youth incarceration, a lot of just trauma overall. And I got this intern at Fathers and Families, and I started to get more aware of the problems that were occurring not only in Stockton, but in San Joaquin County alone. And I started to see a lot more about my youth, my fellow peers, my fellow brothers and sisters, my colored folks. They're suffering. They're suffering big time. And our county, I feel like, has been a little bit neglected. And it's time to really focus on our youth, because we want schools, not prison. They're our future scholars, our future leaders, and we are able, as one of the organizations out there, to really help our youth and empower our youth, because they're facing a lot more things that I take advantage of on a daily basis. I'm blessed to have my family. I'm blessed to wake up on the bright side of my bed, have food on my table every single day, but our youth are getting neglected. And there's 65 youth within juvenile hall right now. 8 of them are adjudicated. 8 of them do not have a place to go home. 8 of them are getting left alone, feeling like they're unworthy, like they don't have a voice for themselves. Hopefully with Fathers and Family, we hope to achieve that. We hope to let them feel empowered. Just that one kind word to them can just change their whole day and their whole outlook on life and the position they want to take, and actually help them to become their best self. So we're not asking for this money to use it on reckless things. We're focusing on our communities, our colored brothers and sisters that are suffering within Stockton and the San Joaquin County. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Lizette Diaz.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lizette Diaz. I am a youth mentor specialist for CARAS, which is a nonprofit in Gilroy. And first and foremost, we want to say thank you for funding, for giving us this funding. We routinely score in the top 3 for youth arrest in the last 10 years in our county, and we need services like Shinatli and Hovinoble, mentoring youth to keep them out of the justice system. These funds will go a long way because we are such a small nonprofit, and it's very hard for us to get these funding, right? So when we partner up and we work together, we make big things happen. So thank you very much, and we would also like to support the additional 5.9 that's resting of the funding. We would like to support for Indian Native American tribes. Since I know that there's more than 50 tribes that applied and not everybody got certain funding, but they are hurting as well, just as our communities, and I would like to speak in support of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and last one. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Is it Raimundo? Oh,
Good morning. Thank you so much for having us here today and for making this funding available for all the CBOs here in state of California serving justice-impacted youth. My name is Raimundo Armendariz, and I work for the National Center for Youth Law. I would also like to mention that for the next round of funding, it's going to be very important. I think somebody mentioned it already earlier on the panel that that funding should be able to be applied for directly from community-based organizations, and community-based organizations, hopefully, you all will consider allowing them to be lead agencies in the application process. So wanted to mention that, but also there are a number of counties in the Central Valley. Central Valley happens to be one of the more poor areas identified by the federal government in our country. So I think that for future funding, I think that the Central Valley should definitely be considered as a place for funding for the Youth Reinvestment Fund and for establishing and supporting capacity for community-based organizations. Thank you.
Thank you.
we have two more for this agenda item. Could we have Renee Menard and Daphne Kazani line up?
Hi, my name is Renee Menard. I'm a communications and policy analyst with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. Just really wanted to come up and thank the Youth Reinvestment Grant Executive Steering Committee and the co-chairs for all the work that went into developing out this grant. There was a really strong show, not only of people who ultimately were on the Executive Steering Committee, but folks in the community who really wanted to join and be a part of this process. So we really saw how much that can strengthen the outcomes of a grant program. As my fellow community members have mentioned coming up here today, there of course are some growing pains with a new grant program, and we really look forward to this next round of funding being an opportunity to strengthen the Youth Reinvestment Grant while also continuing to push these funds toward the areas where they need it most, not only in smaller counties and in rural counties, but also directly to community-based organizations like Fathers and Family in San Joaquin and others who came up to speak that really meet directly with youth and provide the healing and the trauma-centered support that they need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Daphne Gazani. I am an attorney at the National Center for Youth Law. We want to echo the thanks and gratitude to the Executive Steering Committee and to everybody on the BSCC. We are encouraged by this first round, but really want to be able to reflect on some of the things that we've learned with the first round and our hopes for the second round. One thing that was brought up was the impediment of being able to access that funding. Particularly, actually, we were doing technical assistance in small counties, and one of the things was for CBOs that did exist in those counties, the hurdle of being able to get the city or the county to apply on their behalf because it had to go through so many steps. And so we understand we want strong partnerships with government, but we also had school districts who were willing to be there for those counties, but that extra step caused a barrier to be able to access that funding. So we hope with the next round, perhaps there could be some scoring preference to smaller counties, to areas in Northern California, Central California, to be able to access that funding. Additionally, being able to do community awareness workshops for different areas in the state. We saw a lot of showing in Southern California where they did, this town hall meeting. They got that message out there. So being able to provide that assistance for the next round, we think would be really important and would help applicants. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for now. Yeah.
Okay, having heard public comments, I'd now go back to the board and ask if you have any further discussion on this item. Hearing none, I will look for a motion in a second.
I'll make a motion that we approve staff's recommendation as included on page 3 of agenda item B.
Second?
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Let the record reflect that Chief Varela has been out in the hallway for some time now. He abstains. All right, I think we got this. Yeah, let's have him come back in. Thank you, Judge. I appreciate you taking care of me there. Did we send a search party out? All right. Sometimes we let these people, run out of here and then we lose them. They get that moment of freedom and off they go. Yes, yes. Sounds like he's screaming on his way back in. I hope he comes voluntarily. Chief Powers, you weren't excused. That appears to be a non-authorized exit. A guy's last day and he leaves, just walks out. Okay. Yeah, see, I get you. I feel your pain. Chief Varela.
I assume it went good, right?
Well, we're not allowed to tell you the outcome, but no, yes.
David, you got a chance to say
No,
a
I'm
few
done,
things?
but I think it's your turn.
I just want to say a few things. Number one, just to let the board know, our ESC members were fabulous. They were passionate. They had a lot of expertise. I felt, I've been around for quite a while, but I felt like every time that we met, and we did meet quite a number of times, I felt like I learned something. So fantastic, did a lot of work. The proposals were very creative. There was a lot of out-of-the-box thinking, but it was really clear to me, and I'm assuming speaking for David as well, is that there was a lot of momentum throughout the state in keeping kids out of the juvenile justice system or further from further penetration into the system. So that was really delightful, warmed my heart to see the passion that exists throughout the state. Just to echo what was commented before about the BSCC staff, Kimberly and her team are just rock stars. You guys did a lot of heavy lifting, and probably the toughest part of your job was just to coordinate the ESC, which was very, very difficult to do. But just to thank you for all the technical support and all the expertise and the back and forth, and you guys were wonderful. And then, of course, I was the co-chair, but really, David led the charge, and it was great being alongside of you. I felt like I learned a lot of things, and definitely knowledgeable and passionate about this particular area. So it was my honor and pleasure to be alongside of you throughout this process. So thank you.
Well, and likewise, it was you were a great partner in this, and looks like we might get to do it again. Let's see.
All right. Anyway, well, thank you.
Yeah, great remarks. Thank you. Thank everybody. Once again, Kimberly, lots of kudos to you and so good at your job. We'd like you to stay on for the next agenda item, item C, which is the Tribal Youth Diversion Grant Funding Recommendations.
All right, thank you. We will move right on here. So agenda item C, the tribal component of the Youth Reinvestment Grant. Again, we have 1.1 million. And the time frame in terms of what happened to get us to today looks very much like the grant we just talked about. But there are a couple distinctions, so I'll walk through this quickly. As with the previous one, we first came before this board last July and asked for the appointment of the Executive Steering Committee co-chairs as it turned out to be. And And that happened that day, and we got the approval to move forward with the Executive Steering Committee. One of the things that happened right away was Mr. Steinhardt and Chief Varela recognized that with this tribal component, there was a level of subject matter expertise that was going to be needed to work on this tribal component. And so they took action quickly to establish a tribal advisory group. And we got a great group of folks together, and they worked through the fall on the RFP. And as with the other grant, I was able to come to you on January 17th to request approval of the request for proposals that was developed by that tribal advisory group. With that approval, we got it out into the field, and by March 29th, we had received 10 proposals from eligible applicants. And we then transitioned the tribal advisory group members into the role of being proposal raters, provided them the training to do that. And on May 30th, they had their final meeting to develop their funding recommendation. In this case, because the tribal advisory group served as advisory to the ESC, their recommendation went first to the Executive Steering Committee at its meeting on June 4th. The ESC approved the Tribal Advisory Group's funding recommendation, and that's what you have before you today. Before we look at that, just a couple quick reminders about what this grant is all about. So looking at the purpose, it's really to provide diversion services to Indian children who are under age 18, who are facing entry to the juvenile justice system or further involvement in that system, and also who are experiencing high rates of juvenile arrests, high rates of suicide, high rates of alcohol and substance abuse, and low high school graduation rates. Looking at some of the technical requirements related to this grant, it was limited so that only federally recognized tribes were eligible to apply. In this case, there was no minimum amount that could be requested, and the maximum amount was the full amount available for the grant overall of $1.1 million. Tribes were allowed to submit multiple proposals. They were also allowed to submit regional proposals, and in this case, the Tribal Advisory Group adopted preference points for proposals that included a consortium of tribes. In the case of the Tribal Youth Diversion Program, there were no funding categories established, so everyone competed with each other in this process, and there was no scoring threshold adopted. So with all that in mind, what we're looking at today is $1.1 million available through this grant. And with that, the recommendation out of the Tribal Advisory Group and the Executive Steering Committee is to fully fund the highest ranked proposal, which was from the Pinoleville Pomo Nation at a level of $889,737. And to, bless you, to partially fund the Karuk tribe at $229,263. So then just looking at that in a little bit more detail here, and again, I see this slide is fairly small. If it is helpful, this is also in attachment C2 of your packet. But what we have here, again, you see the first and second highest ranked proposals as Pinoleville Pomo Nation and the Karuk tribe. And again, because of the amount of funding that was available overall, we're able to fully fund the highest ranked proposal, but then only partially fund the second highest ranked proposal. So Karuk tribe, if you approve this item today, they would be offered an amount that's about $20,000 less than their original request. And then I also included on this slide a list of the other proposals we received and the tag rated. So you can see the additional requested amounts that we had and where those came from and the rank of those. So we had about 4.7 million more requested than what was available to spend on this tribal grant. But with the 1.1 million that we did have, oops, actually meant to go back that way. Just a little cleaner slide to look at there in terms of our request before you today is again to adopt the recommendation of the Tribal Advisory Group and the Executive Steering Committee to fund the two highest ranking tribes using the full amount that's available for this program.
Okay.
And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
No, I think you made it clear.
Just a quick word of
Yes.
thanks to Olin Jones and the folks who worked on the Tribal Advisory Committee. They did the heavy lifting, and they were the subject matter experts, and they did a great job. Of course, unable with the $1 million limitation to fund all the proposals, but the legislature looks like it's compensating for that with perhaps 10 million in the new round for Indian tribal.
Yes. Anything else from the board? Looking to the public, do we have any comments on this item?
Yes, we do. If we could have these commenters line up, Daphne Gozani, Bonnie Lockhart, and Angela James.
I believe one more.
Oh. And Chris Lindstrom.
Daphne Gozani, National Center for Youth Law. We, again, are very excited about this first round of funding and the additional 10 million that will be coming out. With only 1 million this year and 109 federally recognized tribes in California, there was a lot of competition. A lot of tribes were discouraged from even trying to apply. And so we think with a bigger pot of money, we will see even more enthusiasm with the application. With the leftover 5.9 million from the Youth Reinvestment Fund, we're excited that the BSCC is working with the Department of Finance to find a solution for that. We would encourage looking at rolling over maybe some of those funds to tribes to be able to access that. We think that's in line with the intent of the legislation, and look forward to seeing that money go out to the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bonnie Lockhart, and I'm the program coordinator for the Native American Youth and Adult Partnership Program through Pinole Pomo Nation. And I'm here just to say thank you for considering this proposal. I know that there were many tribes who applied, and I have to say that I chose to work for Pinole Pomo Nation on this project because they're passionate about outreaching to other tribal communities. Honestly, in Mendocino County, our cities, our officials, they need support to engage the tribal communities as a whole, also to just bring the community together. Even in the recent fires that we had a lot of disconnect in our county, and I think that Pinoleville does a really good job of saying, yes, we have trauma, yes, we have challenges, yes, our children are struggling, and yet we have to persevere, even in the face of systems that might be established to do that from the beginning. So I just want to say that it's a really good choice to think about working with a tribe that is passionate about that and building those partnerships. Oh.
Sintamana, Keishie, Angela James, Yamo Bidad, Kayana, Yahweh Emek Kadimachi. My name is Angela James, and I'm from Pinoleville Pomo Nation. I thank the Creator for this day. I have served Pinoleville Tribal Council as the vice chairperson for 25 years. I also served Ukiah Unified School District for 16 plus years on their Native American Parent Committee, Title VI, it always changes, the Title VI program. And I'm very excited and thankful to everybody that played a part in developing the youth diversion program for tribal communities. Pinoleville Pomo Nation also runs a vocational rehabilitation program, and we partner with the state Voc Rehab also on that. We also have a Department of Education grant, and we've partnered with Ukiah Unified School District. And we also run it's a MSPI, Meth and Suicide Prevention Program, and partner with several of the community organizations in Mendocino County. And I think this was kind of the missing part, a missing piece, and I'm excited to be partnering with our local law enforcement and probation departments just to enhance all of those programs together. So today, I respectfully ask a yes vote from the board on the recommendation in front of you. Thank you.
You.
Good morning. My name's Chris Lindstrom, Executive Officer of the California Tribal Business Alliance. We have 3 member tribes in our alliance. The Piqui and Rancheria Chukchansi Indians, who rank number 3. The Torres Martinez Desert Cahuilla Indians, who rank number 4. And Paula Band of Mission Indians, who rank number 6. So we're not here in protest. We want to commend the work of the legislature. It was headed by Mr. Jones Sawyer. He did a great job. This year, Mr. Ramos headed and championed getting through the assembly and into the conference committee $10 million for this very same program. And we anticipate that being signed into law relatively soon. So we're here to commend the work of the legislature and this board, and we support the proposed action item that's before you. There was one question, which is outside of what your action is that with the $10 million that's coming forward, do you anticipate issuing a brand new RFP, or are you going so more tribes could participate, or are you going to look at the existing rankings and fund them? And I could also talk to Aaron, who I've known a long time. Sorry, I didn't know you were here, Aaron, but.
We're going to withhold response on that.
Okay.
Excellent question. It may or may not work that way.
Right.
We don't know yet. We like the product, but
Yeah.
it has to be,
Sure.
discussed.
Anyway, this is critically important to Native youth. One of the things that I learned, I monitor legislation, is that the recidivism rate of Native Americans in the adult system is over 70%. So if you could keep kids from dropping out of school or helping them just keeping out of the juvenile justice system, this is going to significantly impact lives. So congratulations on the work, and, keep doing a good job.
Thank you.
See you, Aaron.
See, Aaron.
Hi, I'm back. Raimundo Armendariz with the National Center for Youth Law. I definitely wanted to echo and support the comments and recommendations made by my colleague Daphne Gozani. I also wanted to mention that, yes, we had, as co-authors of the Youth Reinvestment Fund and the Youth Reinvestment Grant, a lot of the intent behind the Youth Tribal Youth Reinvestment Grant was to make sure that we impacted as many tribal groups and applicants as possible. So we just wanted to mention that if for the future Youth Reinvestment Grant for 2019, for the Tribal Youth Reinvestment Grant, we would hope that more tribes could be awarded. I know of those that we've been communicating with, we felt that there was a lot more stronger applications that were submitted. So we hope that the board in the future can consider making sure they fund more tribal youth applicants. I'll leave that. Thanks.
That's all for public comment.
That's it. Okay, back to the board for any further comment. Seeing none, I'd ask for a motion and a second. Move. Thank you. Second, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? I don't think anybody left for this, so motion carries. Now, moving on. This is the first time I've been booted from the room on a recusal, so I am leaving my able board member, Sheriff Groudon, in the room to carry this on. Welcoming Ricardo Goodrich to the podium. I'm leaving.
And just for the record, we note pursuant to Government Code Section 1091, Chief Ortola and Chair Penner are leaving the rooms. Nevada County Behavioral Health are a potential awardee, and then the Fresno County Superior Court, although they're not currently in the money, they still have applied, and Chair Penner is married to someone who works for the Fresno County Superior Court. So that is why we're asking her to recuse herself.
Aaron, I know that the County Ventura Public Defender's Office was one of the applicants as well. I haven't been involved in any of the conversations. I haven't been on the ESC.
It's up to you, Chief, because it's not going to your department. We call that a non-interest under 1091.5, so you're welcome to stay. You're welcome to, as long as we have enough, you can also excuse yourself. That would be fine.
Okay, I'm going to stay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Ricardo, it's all you.
Thank you. Perfect. Good morning, Ricardo Goodrich from the Corrections Planning and Grants Program Division. And before I get into the item, I just want to take a quick second just to acknowledge Board Member Barranco. Thank you so much for leading and facilitating the process. Very much appreciated that. We have some members from the scoring panel who may be watching from the live stream, want to acknowledge them as well. Deputy Rowe served on our scoring panel from the Sacramento Sheriff's Department. Want to thank you as well, and also to our internal researcher, Stacy Riley, who did a phenomenal job just keeping everything organized. So on that note, agenda item D, requested the board approve 23 grant program funding recommendations from the Proposition 47 scoring panel for approximately $96 million. Just for some brief background, Prop 47 was a voter-approved initiative on the November 2014 ballot that tasked the BSCC with administering a grant program aimed at supporting mental health treatment, substance use disorder treatment, and diversion programs for people in the criminal justice system. So a few key activities that affected the development of the grant program. This board appointed Board Member Barranco as chair of the Proposition 47 scoring panel on November 8, 2018. An RFP was released on January 18, 2019, with proposals due March 18, 2019. And a 13-member scoring committee was formed and convened April 3rd and 4th and June 5th of 2019. So it is worth noting that there was significant interest in this grant opportunity. 43 proposals requested $193 million. Of that number, 10 proposals were from cities, 30 from counties, and 3 from school districts. The RFP includes a few elements that are also important to highlight. So applicants were limited to public agencies. Public agency applicants were required to subcontract with one or more non-governmental community-based organization for a minimum of 50% of the total grant award. Applicants could apply in either a small or a large scope category, regardless of their jurisdiction size, and you can see that breakdown on the screens before you. So applicants in the smaller category could apply for up to $1 million. Again, jurisdiction size, not an issue. Conversely, in the large scope category, applicants could apply for up to $6 million, and the County of Los Angeles was limited to one application for the county for up to $18.6 million. And then I'll also note that the grant period covers August 2019 through May of 2023. So a total of 23 grant programs are recommended for funding. So of the 23, all small scope proposals that met the minimum scoring threshold are recommended for funding, and you can see those on your screen. 8 small proposals are recommended to receive approximately $7.8 million, a balance of $10.7 million from the small scope category, which transferred to the large scope category for funding in rank order until all funds were exhausted. So 15 large scope proposals are recommended to receive approximately $88 million. Contra Costa County Behavioral Health Services fell at the funding cutoff point and is recommended to receive a partial award on the large scope category. And just of note from the board, you may recall prior conversations regarding applicant eligibility, maybe 2 or 3 meetings ago. So it's just worth noting that 12 of the 23 applicants recommended for funding are existing grantees. So on behalf of the Proposition 47 scoring panel, staff recommends that the board fully award 14 large and 8 small proposals for programs and initiatives to provide mental health services, substance use disorder treatment, and/or diversion programs for people in the criminal justice system. Offer 1 partial award to Contra Costa County Behavioral Health Services, which fell at the funding cutoff point in a large proposal rank list. Authorize staff to continue to make awards from the proposal rank ordered list if existing grantees from the first round of funding relinquish an award, if additional deposits are made into the Second Chance Fund, if any applicant is unable to accept the award or relinquishes an award first by offering it to any partial awardee equitably. Authorize staff to continue to make awards as noted as above, should be determined during the follow-up or award-making process that an applicant recommended for funding is ineligible, and award amounts, and adjust award amounts, to grantees equitably if deposits are different than what is estimated in the RFP, and we should have the more accurate numbers by mid-August. And with that said, that concludes staff's presentation.
Thank you, Ricardo, and thank you for your work on this project. Any questions for Ricardo from the board?
Yeah, just one question, and you said this and I didn't catch it. How many of the previously funded Prop 47 programs received funding this?
12.
Recommend 12. And how much was the total amount of that?
Do not have that
Okay,
figure.
okay.
Any other questions for Ricardo?
No, just I had to remind myself about the history and the flow of this. So we had a first round in 2016 and an ESC chaired by Lizzie Perez and Scott Budnick, as I recall. So this time the RFP was essentially recycled, it sounds like, and just a scoring panel.
That is correct.
Just needed to clear that up in my own mind, and thank you, Gordon, for your leadership on that.
Yeah, I was going to say, before we go to public comment, I wanted to thank Judge Bronco for serving as the chair of the scoring committee and give you an opportunity to make any comments that you have.
Well, good. I hope that I'm going to be brief. The first thing I wanted to echo is what the chairs of the previous grants said about staff and committee, but while I want to echo that, I want to get very specific. Ricardo and Stacy, staff people who were assigned to this, spoon-fed us from beginning to end. And I say this on behalf of the 13-member committee, the scoring committee. There were no wallflowers on that scoring committee. No one had to be asked to express his or her opinion. We heard it over and over again. And I say that, and that's not a criticism of that committee. I'm going to get to them in a second, but Ricardo and Stacy led us through this entire process. It's something that many of us had never done before. It was reminding me of the bar exam in 1973 when I took it. Reading these, holding the scoring criteria in one hand, looking at my computer, taking notes, and I even went through the same motions that I did when I took the bar exam. I had to get up and leave and plan a lot of stuff. But at any rate, these guys led us through that entire, very challenging process. There was I know I speak on behalf of the entire committee. I want to thank so much Ricardo and Stacy, and I think Stacy's here. Would you please stand up so the board can see you, Stacy? Yeah. They really, really led us well. The committee, as the scoring committee, as I said, was made up of a very good cross-section of people, a cross-section of professions, and as I say, no wallflowers, no problems with expressing their opinions over and over again, and yet the entire discussion was very civilized, very, very civilized, and even though we disagreed, we agreed that we could disagree and still be very cordial. The third thing that observation I want to make, all of these applicants, as all of you know, were worthy. I think that, maybe you said it, Ricardo, I think maybe we had $96 million allotted, and the grants, if we granted everyone, which everyone could have been granted, it would have been approximately $200 million. But one thing that I noticed about many of the grants that really made me very happy, there were a lot of different collaborative programs. But in particular, what I noticed about this group is the collaboration that is occurring in many areas in our state between the unified school district and law enforcement. And I say that to say, not just because of those are the agencies involved, but it actually looks like it's collaborative. I've been involved in collaborative justice so long that unfortunately some of the agencies are not collaborative. It's a power struggle. And I just want to say I was so very happy, and I don't need to name the specific programs. You see the list of the programs. The Unified School District and law enforcement really are making attempts, setting aside their egos at the door and really trying to make attempts to make things better. So that's it.
Thank you again, Judge. Appreciate it. At this point, we'll go to public comment. Adam,
We do not have public comment for this item.
anyone in the audience have a public comment? We have one gentleman stepping up. Sir, if you wouldn't mind just providing your name.
Yes, my name is Christian Franco. I'm representing the collaborative Milpa based out of East Salinas, Monterey County. And just, the comment that was just made about systems working together, we respect that, understand that it's a challenge always for systems to, travel around the red tape, if you would, and work together. I just want to represent the community as well, who has to work with both systems, and just the understanding that those that are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. We work with communities, we work with families, we work with students, we work with kids, we work with schools, and we also try to work with probation and law enforcement as well. Excuse me. So we just, want to thank you for the first round of funding, and for the second round as well. I know our organization applied the first time and received those fundings, but we did meet challenges as far as reimbursements, as far as overhead, all those challenges that take a lot of time away from our staff, being formerly incarcerated, working in the field, working in the communities. It's really a challenge at times, and so we just ask that you view that in the second round and moving forward to really assist us with the technical support that is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other public comment? Seeing that there's no further public comment, we will close public comment and bring it back to the board for comments or questions.
I'll move approval as the staff recommends.
Okay, we have a motion to approve staff recommendation. Do we have a second? Second, Sheriff Gore. All in favor? Oh, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. And should we record reflect again the people that have been outside the room?
Sure, and that's Chair Penner and Chief Rotolo are out of the room at this moment.
And now they can come back. Two-minute break. Okay, we're going to take a 2-minute break.
Your seat, please. See, she doesn't listen to me. You do what you do. Executive Director Howard. You were playing around when I wanted you to take your seat. Okay, we're now moving on to item E, Title II Request for Proposal, Technical Changes, and Re-Release. We don't often get a re-release, so this is very exciting.
Very exciting. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board.
And actually, Tim, I hate to interject on this because I do sort of realize we are approving an RFP to go out to the field. So to the extent, normally if we have a government agency applying, it's usually probation. So if our probation chiefs might want to look and see if Title II is something you might be interested in, I'd ask that you excuse yourselves now. And it looks like Chief Varela is making his way out of the room.
Well, let the record reflect
And
that
Chief Ortola.
Chief Ortola's missed a lot of this meeting. We did take pictures of everybody from San Joaquin County out front, so we were busy. Yes, yes. Time well spent. Okay,
Thank you.
Okay.
Tim,
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Timothy Polasic. I'm a field representative in the Corrections Planning and Grant Programs Division here at BSCC, and I'm assigned to the Title II Grant Program. I am presenting Agenda Item E, which is a request for the board approval of technical changes to the Title II and Tribal Youth Request for Proposals, or RFPs, and also approval for the re-release of the RFPs. The technical changes include adding eligibility for non-governmental nonprofit agencies to apply for the Title II RFP, clarification of tribal eligibility, which affects both the Title II and tribal RFPs, a funding methodology for the Title II RFP that would allow funding of at least one proposal for each of the 6 program purpose areas, and then the timeline is also has changes that reflect, the timeline also reflects these changes. So for this item, staff recommends that the board approve the technical changes to the Title II and tribal RFPs as approved by the SAC-JAB and approve the re-release of the RFPs to the field.
please stated. Looking to the board for any remarks? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'd look to the board for a motion. A second?
I'll make a motion that we approve the staff's recommendation.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Let the record reflect that Chief Ortola and Chief Varela are out of the room. Thank you, Tim. Simple. Okay. Yeah, we need to get, thank you. We want you to get your exercise. I guess while we have this short break, we could have Jerry Powers say a few more words. They never thought it would go this fast. They ran away. Yeah, there they are. Yeah. We had to send a judge out to get you. Yeah. Yeah, we didn't have a bailiff, we would have done it. Okay, we're now actually at the public comment portion of the agenda, wherein we would invite any member of the public to come forward and say a few words on any item, even if it was not on the agenda today. And I'd look to see if we have any speakers ready. Hey, Chief, how are you?
I'm fine, Madam Chair, thank you. I would like to, as the representative of the Southern California Chiefs on the Executive Committee of the Chief Probation Officers Association, congratulate Member Powers for his extraordinary service to public safety in the state of California, and wish you very well in your future endeavors, Jerry. Thank you.
Thank you. Enough about Chief. Anybody else in the public like to make a comment? Unless it's about Chief Powers, and then I'd ask you to stay in your seat. No, that's not true. I don't mean that. Okay. I'd like to thank everybody for attending and the participation and the travel and, oh, you may do that without a speaker card because we're flexible here at the BSCC. Moments of brilliance.
Yeah, being you made such a gracious invitation, I thought I'd take the opportunity. So my name's Randall Broadhurst here in the Sacramento area with GAP, Gang Awareness and Prevention. And so as I try to do anytime I'm involved in these meetings is to bring up something that is somewhat addressed but doesn't get addressed from a financial standpoint, which is the probationers as opposed to parolees who are released out of the state prison system and their particular needs. As I stated in a meeting, I don't know, 2 or 3, 4 months ago, whenever it was, there was a lot of funding brought up again, and for the second time in a row, the state assembly and the politicians did not put in any money in for the probationers. So when they come out, they don't have any housing. They don't have any, the counties, the probation departments don't have any funds for reentry when these young adults under the age of 25 come out. So it's a problem for probation that they all acknowledge. That was supposed to be brought up again in the probation department's annual meeting. I don't know if it was brought up. But it's a problem from a community-based organization, which I am, and I work with the Sacramento County Probation for reentry. So when these young people come out, it's like, okay, we look at each other with probation, it's like, okay, how are we gonna find housing? Or we're gonna find shelter, food, the necessary things, jobs, so on and so forth. So we all do our best, but it would just be super helpful if somewhere along the line in the chain of command and the chain of money and the flow of grants, that this would be made available to the counties, no less, so that these probationers, it's a small group, it's a small percentage compared to the adult population, but yet they do come out and they keep going in. So when they come out, I just don't want them neglected, that's all.
Thank
All right?
you. Good remarks. Thank you. All right, anybody else? All right, then I will move forward and adjourn this meeting, and thank you all for being here.